We've gone through many sacks of service chiefs and appointments of new ones. And in all this, the terrorists, the kidnappers, and the bandits seem to be getting more daring. Now they don't deploy even drones to prosecute their own criminal activities. Now, how effective would you say this change can bring to the way we prosecute this war against these criminals? And also, how often do you think it's necessary to effect changes of service chiefs?
Well, okay. The issue of command change is a routine thing in the armed forces. That's what we call billets in the armed forces and in most security organizations, which means you go into a position for a specific period of time, usually 2 years, 3 years. And so while in that position, whatever is needed for you to do, you have to do within that time period. When the time comes for you to rotate or retire, you have to retire. That's what we call mandatory removal time. When it gets to that mandatory removal time, you have to go, right? The reason is because new people must have to rise because they have to grow through their career chain to ensure that you have the morale, you boost the morale of the soldiers. If you're stagnated in a position, it leads to decline in effectiveness. So command change is routine. People will come, people will go. That's why we emphasize in building strong institutions rather than strong personalities. Because you can't build an institution around an individual. Because eventually that individual must leave. They can die, something may happen to them. And so it's routine. Now, are there some risk to command changes? Of course, in every time you change command, it's a bag of risk and opportunities. The opportunities, of course, is that there will be people who will rise through the chain. It could lead to boost in morale. But the risk is that as you remove people, there may be a short-term disruption in terms of operation, such as loss in operational memory. Yeah. But I've looked at this particular change that was done. It is not like the kind of changes that you saw in previous administration where everybody leaves at once. What happened in this instance is that the Chief of Army Staff was elevated to Chief of Defense Staff. Now, you have retained some level of institutional memory in that instance because he is not new to what has been going on. And then the Chief of Intelligence was not changed. He remains in his position. So I would say that this particular reshufflement was strategic and targeted so that you don't lose all of the institutional memory of what has been going on before the change.
Well, President Tinubu emphasized professionalism, vigilance, and camaraderie in his charge to the new service chiefs. Does that imply that these values had been weakened under the previous military leadership?
Well, the thing is that as you are in a position, of course, there will be challenges. Now, when challenges show up, depending on how you manage it, command presence is probably one of the most required threat that every commander must have. The mere fact that you are in this location changes everything. That's what we call command presence. The presence of the commander must be felt, in every operation. Now, as time goes on, depending on how effective and the relationship between the commander and the subordinates, because no commander works alone. People have to support you and feed you with information. The military is more like, it's a community. It's a system where you have several organs, and each organ has to function effectively for the entire system to be able to function effectively. And so, depending on how that commander is able to manage those units, those other commanders, it may get to the point that he may begin to lose the confidence of those who are working for him. In those instances, unit cohesion will begin to suffer. And when unit cohesion and camaraderie, like you said, begin to suffer, the operations will also begin to suffer. I don't know if that is what was the case in this particular instance, but it does happen where the commanders start losing, the commanders begin to lose trust in their commander.
Okay, it is said that a change is a change, but a change may not also be a change, just an ordinary change, if there are new tactics introduced. Now, in this instance, what are those changes in tactics you will expect that the new commanders will bring on board? We've had issues where we talked about kinetic and non-kinetic, and we still had this upsurge in this criminality. Now, what are those practical changes you will be expecting that the new commanders, the new chiefs will bring on board, so that it will not be business as usual, and because we are getting to an election year, where we will need to enforce the superiority of our military over these criminals?
Okay, now, these service chiefs are, of course, what we call strategic leadership. They are not usually involved in the tactical operations, right? The people who are usually involved in tactics, at the tactical level, are the junior level officers, the captains, the lieutenants, sometimes the major. The generals are usually at the very top echelon. They are the ones who design the strategy of what happens at the strategic level. Of course, they get briefings from the presidency, with the national security advisor, and they put them into a strategy. The strategy devolves into tactics as it goes down. It's all of those tactics that come together to achieve the strategic objective of the commander-in-chief. Now, every leader has one or two things that it can contribute in terms of the policy direction, depending on what they see on ground, the report that they get. And so it is not possible for me to sit here now and tell you that this is the direction that any service chief is going to go, because they have to look at what is happening on ground, and based on what is happening on ground and the directives that they get from their commander-in-chief, they will be able to evolve a new strategy going forward. Of course, there will be changes, because you have new energies being injected into the system, because you have new people at the helm of affairs. So it's after a while that we will know the strategies that these new service chiefs are going to evolve. But let me say this, because I've always said it, each time there's a change in service chiefs. We look at these service chiefs as if they're going to go there and do magic. They cannot do magic. The insecurity problem in Nigeria can't be solved by service chiefs alone. There is no one service chief or group of service chiefs that are going to solve the insecurity problem of Nigeria on their own. It is a collective effort of both the political leadership and the military leadership, and even the civilian population, which is us, coming together, we'll be able to solve our insecurity problem. There are structural issues that we have to address, regardless of who is the service chiefs. One of them is we have to deal with the issue of our porous borders. Our borders are too porous, and so long as those borders remain porous, and we don't know who is crossing into our country, and for what purposes, and what they're bringing in, we will continue to go in this cycle. So it's not a matter of changing service chiefs. You can change service chiefs and you discover that you just recycle the same problem. If you don't deal with those structural issues. We have to deal with corruption. We have to deal with the delay in funding. I've had issues about, I've had people say, look, we are funding our military more now than ever. The thing is that if you compare what we are spending in our defense and national security per capita with even our poor neighbors, you discover that per capita we are spending less than some of these poor countries. And even when the fundings come, they do come late. Security is something that, you have to be able to respond. They're all time dependent. You have to be able to respond as at that time. If you delay in funding as a result of politics, then by the time that fund comes around, the problem that you intend to use it to solve may have evolved even more, that the funding may not be sufficient again to deal with it at that time. You have to go back and seek for additional funding. and they will go back and they will delay the beds. And by the time they get that additional funding, the problem continues to evolve.